back to another New Fools podcast. We got the infamous Sans Blue player, Fuck, I fucked it up. We got the famous Sans Blue player, Huntalicious, Hunter, whatever you want to call him. I fucked all that up. Doesn't matter. Keeping it all in. What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing good. It is Huntilius for all those who don't know me from the Discord scene. Yeah. But I go by Hunter. So you'll see me trolling around in any of the random Discords. I'm in way too many of them. There's too many.
Me too. Yeah, we played a few TTP games. That's where I met him, and he's a menace. He's so good. I've never had a bad experience playing with him. If editing doesn't work, we have a little bit of an issue. He's upside down for me, but hopefully for you guys I fixed it. But if not, we're just going to Spider-Man kiss. So break the ice. Fine with me. Yeah, break the ice, man. How'd you get into Magic, man? What year? What set? I love asking people this question.
So I started playing Magic back in Dark Ascension. So I've been playing about 13, 14 years now.
Yeah,
roughly.
That was 11.
So I've been playing since I was about 10 years old. Cool. My local store had free F&M. My dad bought me a stupid starter deck, and he would drop me off at F&M at 5 o'clock on a Friday and disappear for 5-6 hours, and I just had fun. Playing at a store, getting my butt kicked. It was great.
Yeah, it was a
bunch of the people I play with now see me as a menace.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Now look at you. So we have him on today because he was the only Sans Blue player in the top 16 of the Rumble. And I couldn't not talk about this. And my buddy Captain on TTB, he's like, hey man, you need to do a podcast with this guy. And I was like, I fucking know that guy. The deck's awesome. So today we're going to get into it. He top 16 the Rumble with this crazy deck. So we're going to do a deck tech later. We're going to talk about the win lines, all that fun stuff, all the good stuff. What was the commanders again? Wernog and Elmar?
So,
what's the Friends Forever?
So the ones most people know him by are Will and Max.
Will and Max.
But the in-universe commanders are going to be Wernog and Elmar. Most people who are in the CEDH scene will know Wernog Bjorna or Will and Lucas.
Yeah, those are the blue farm colors,
that is
right?
the Sans green pairing.
Yeah.
That's the one most people are used to.
Gotcha. Yeah, so before we get into the deck and hop into the commanders, how'd you, get into CDH and, why CDH? Because I've talked to a lot of people and they're like, oh, I love high power and I just want to be competitive. And then why this deck? Is this, the best run you've ever done with this deck? Or are you just, are you a CDH grinder?
So, the big thing that got me into CDH is I have always been a competitive 60-card player. So I've always been standard, modern, legacy. I've always been one of those players that like competitive. But during the whole COVID thing, not a lot of events were firing, so it was more or less just casual table pods at that point of Commander. And my play group was starting to get into Commander, and because all of us were 60-card grinders, we just slowly started creeping up the power level until all of us were at CEDH before we knew what CEDH was.
Yeah.
And we were sitting there at CEDH games, and it was just games were ending on turn 3, turn 4, and some people weren't enjoying it until we were told we were actually at a CEDH table. For reference, the first CEDH commander that I fully built was Urza.
Me too.
I was playing Urza before the Paradox engine ban.
Oh, really? I was later. I was 2021, 2022.
So, I am in full belief that Urza is the reason Paradox engine is on the ban list.
Yeah.
Urza got released, and then a month later,
We got
Paradox Engine was banned. So
yeah.
if that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what does. But I have always enjoyed the infinite mana outlets in the command zone, in some form or another.
Yeah.
Those have always been the decks that I gravitate to. I've
Me
tried a
too.
bunch of other decks. Blue Farm's been one I've tried. Rogsai I've played, but the lines are too linear for me, and that's why I've never liked those decks. It's
Hmm.
you find your A and B in the deck, and you're done. But everybody
Boring.
knows they're
Sweet.
coming.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah.
Everybody knows what's happening.
Hmm.
You find your A plus B, and you're done. And
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that. That's a great way to play. A lot of people like that, but sadly, that's not for me. I enjoy having extra options. So when you have a infinite mana outlet in the command zone, um, you get to find your A plus B combos, but the C part of your combo is always going to be your commander, which
Yeah.
you always have access to. So it makes deck building a lot more interesting because you can throw in A plus B combos that work with different cards. So think the Devoted Druid lines that Thrasios decks are using right now. You can use Hazel's Brewmaster. You can use Swift Reconfiguration. You can use Machine God's Effigy and One with the Stars. So there's a bunch of different cards that you have options that work with Devoted Druid and your commander that you can just funnel that into. So it allows for more diverse deck building within a single deck. The reason I ended up here on Wernog Elmar, specifically the Sans Blue pairing, was because the deck was unexplored. When I first started playing it, the only person who had registered at an event placed 64th in both events, and it was the same guy. If you look at entries for this list throughout EDH Top 16's history, there's only going to be like maybe 20.
Wow.
And I'd say about 8 of them are the same guy. And because it hadn't been explored, and there's not really other Sans Blue options. The only other option you really have is Timna Tana, which most people know as Blood Pod.
Yeah.
But the problem that I always found with Blood Pod, because that was the deck that I built right before I built Wernog Elmar, was that Timna and Tana's kind of useless. She doesn't really do anything. She's a 4-drop 2/2 that, yeah, makes you some Saprolines, but those aren't really useful. Timna, by far one of the best commanders out there. No, most people cannot debate that.
Yeah, probably the most.
But the thing with Timna is she kind of forces you to go down a creature path. And most people start doing stacks things. But what I've found in CEDH is stacks isn't as big of a driver right now, especially in the world we're in. Because slowing your opponents down doesn't help in a mid-range world where Ristics and Flash rule. And one big problem I found with stacks decks is they always can get blown out because one person removed the wrong piece at the wrong time. Like, oh, there's this rule of law in play, but someone removed it because they were tired of it, and then the next person won before it could get around.
Right.
So stuff like that kind of took me away from Blood Pod. I wasn't enjoying it. I wasn't having good records. The games, I always felt I was in a good position, and then someone removed something that shouldn't have been removed at that point, and then the game went to someone else.
Mm-hmm. That's the
And
great ace
that's
stacks.
where Wernog Elmar came in.
Mm-hmm.
The big benefit to Wernog and Elmar is Wernog is a infinite mana outlet in quotations
Mm-hmm.
in the command zone. Because it itself isn't actually an outlet. You need something to flicker it. Because when he enters and when he leaves, you always make at minimum a clue. So if you have that infinite mana and you can infinitely flicker something,
Mm-hmm.
you can make an infinite number of clues and then draw your deck. And
Gotcha.
if you have your deck in your hand, you'll most likely find a way to win.
Figure it out. Yeah. Can I go ahead and read them real quick? Let me go ahead and read them real quick, since we're talking about
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so Warnog Riders Chaplain, white and black. Human, when he enters or leaves the battlefield, each opponent may investigate. Each opponent who doesn't lose 1 life, you investigate X times, or X is 1 plus the number of opponents who investigated this way. To investigate, you make a clue. And clues 2, sacrifice it, draw a card. And then Friends Forever, the partner is red, green, Elmer. Haste, when you cast your second spell each turn, untap target creature, then investigate. So, that's what he's talking about.
So, Elmar adds a little interesting twist.
Mm-hmm.
Because Elmar wants to read like a Crom, but he's not a Crom.
Right,
he is sadly not a Crom. I wish he was. But
I wish he was a Crom.
I wish. Yeah. But there's a lot of good benefit that Elmar has that makes him enticing. Mm-hmm. He's a 3/2 with haste, so he's good at hitting if you need to hit. Mm-hmm. If you can cast 2 spells in a turn, you can untap your mana dorks to make your clues, and then on other people's turns, you'll have that mana open for either interaction, or you can crack your clue and draw a card if there's nothing better to do.
Untap target creature.
Okay,
yeah.
So one thing that we were doing, and then a lot of us are still doing, is with Bloom Tender and Fabro Elder, is if you have one of them in play, if you have Wernog and Elmar in play, your Bloom Tender and Fabro Elder will tap for 4 mana. So what you can do is you tap it for 4 mana, cast 2 spells, untap it, you now have 4 mana again. So it kind of has that Kinnan feel to it, kind of. It's not as good at all, but it has that feel of you're accelerating your mana a lot.
Okay, and it's not nothing, because it is the second commander, right? It's not a Vial Smasher or a Silas. Like, that's something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Elmar also has other upsides to him, because he's a 3-drop. In the same thing that Bloodpot is doing, Tymna's a 3-drop. Mm-hmm. You'll turn your Tymna, and you'll go down the Birthing Pod lines. Mm-hmm. For those of you who do not know the Birthing Pod or Vivian on the Hunt lines, Vivian on the Hunt and Birthing Pod read roughly the same. Mm. They just work slightly different and play around different things. Mm. Birthing Pod 3 and a green Phyrexian, so you can pay 2 life or a green, is an artifact where you can pay 1 and a Phyrexian green and tap it to sacrifice a creature. You search your library for a creature with CMC, or converted mana cost, 1 plus the creature sacrificed, and search your library and put that creature into play.
Yeah.
So what you do is you'll sacrifice your 3-drop, and you'll go get Felidar Guardian. Felidar Guardian is 3 and a white for a 1/4 cat beast. that when it enters, you exile one of your permanents and put it right back into play. So what you'll do is you'll exile your birthing pod and put it back into play, and it'll be untapped for you to do this again. You can then sacrifice your Felidar Guardian to go grab Karmic Guide, which is 3 white for a protection from black 2/2 angel with Echo. And when it enters, reanimate a creature from your grave. So what you'll do is you'll reanimate that Felidar Guardian. You'll flicker your birthing pod again. And then you will sacrifice Felidar Guardian to go grab Kiki Jiki, which is 2 red for a Goblin Shaman. That is a 2/2 with haste that can tap to make a token copy of target creature, non-legendary creature you control. So you'll make a copy of your Karmic Guide. When the copy enters, you'll get your Felidar. Felidar will enter, and you will flicker your Kiki this time. When the Kiki enters, you can then make a token copy of your Felidar. When the copy enters, you'll flicker your Kiki, and you will present that loop, making infinite hasty Felidars.
Yeah. Is the deck on that line?
My version specifically is not, but in the Discord where we all brew the deck, there's about 4 or 5 different versions of the deck right now.
Oh, okay.
So we have people doing birthing pod things. We have people doing protein Hulk things. I'm doing the Turbo Reanimator list.
Which is the one I would
and
play.
Then,
it's so good. So spicy.
We do have someone working on a... it was originally an Abzan list, but what they did is they turned it into Wernog Elmar, like Aristocrats style list. And then there's a few other people doing other things with the list right now.
Okay. I gotcha. So let's go ahead and I'm going to share my screen in a minute, and I kind of want to talk about the deck. So, okay, so now we know. Okay, so Sans Blue, you like it better than Blood Pod. How did you look at this deck and you were like, I'm going to fight all these Rhystic Studies and all this interaction and all these counter spells? How is the deck like from here, just like a wet dream, to, hey, I top 16 the Rumble? Like, what would make somebody want to pick this up instead of a blue farm? What do you think?
So the way that I play, at least my version, the Turbo Reanimator, is similar to Rogsai.
Okay.
So instead of focusing on the blue value engines for low mulligans or the blue interaction, I'm focusing in on being a turn slower than Rogsai, but still a turn faster than everyone else.
Okay.
And to fight all of the Rhystic Studies and Mystic Remoras of the world, if you can win underneath them, you don't have to worry about them.
That makes sense. Even post-ban?
Like
because I feel like the format got slower.
Exactly. Because Dockside got banned, the format did get slower.
Yeah.
The pre-ban list was, on average, able to present wins turn 3, turn 4.
Okay.
So this version still falls within that same realm, but it's easier at presenting turn 2 wins.
Yeah, I played against
it. We'll get to it later. One of the rounds during the Rumble was me presenting win on turn 2.
Cool.
And getting the win on turn 2.
Yeah. So, yeah, because they don't really have card advantage except the clues. Do you think it's better post ban because it does make a lot of clues and then obviously your opponents are making clues?
So it plays better into the mid-range world
Okay.
than something like a Rogsai would, because it has the ability to fall back on the clues. It has the
Gotcha.
ability to
Yeah.
fall back on the creatures.
Yeah.
So like my list is currently on 3 to 4 dorks or mana dorks.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So starting a game with a turn 1 mana dork into a turn 2 Elmar puts you in a really good spot for a long game if it goes long. Because Elmar can trigger every turn, every player's turn.
Every player.
So if you
Yeah.
can somehow cast 2 spells on your opponent's turn,
Yeah.
you can untap your mana dorks.
Okay. Okay. So you're playing like the good ones, Bloom Tinder, Birds, yada yada yada.
So funny you should say that. I am not on Bloom Tender in my list.
Okay. Well, we'll get at it in a second. So, I want to ask you one question before I got in the deck tech. So how before we look at how would someone you said it's turbo, right? And it's kind of for me, it's kind of like a Tivit where when Tivit like tries to cast his time sieve, A plus B, and then it's an Esper, and then that doesn't work, and then Thorkel doesn't work, it falls back on I have all this mana, I can crack clues and draw cards. So sleeving this deck up, I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question. So you said it's a turbo. It's slower than Rockside, but it's faster than other decks. But you think that what Rockside can't do is go mid-range, except if they have a Rhystic Study out. This deck can fall back on mid-range just as easy. And is the deck interactive enough where you don't even need blue?
So, back to the question earlier of how do you fight the blue? In my list in particular, because we'll be talking about it in a bit, I'm doing Worldgorger Dragon things, which is by far one of the scariest lines to go for in CDH.
Correct.
Because if you mess up, you lose your whole board, which is a huge downside. And it's pretty easy to interact with because any creature removal, any art enchantment removal, counter spells, any of those things can cause you to lose your board.
Right.
So one of the big things that I found while playing this list is you have to be able to read the table. If you cannot read interaction that someone might have, it makes playing the deck a lot harder.
Okay.
Because not being able to know, okay, this person has no creature interaction or removal, so I can go for it now.
Okay, so maybe this deck isn't for beginners. Maybe this deck isn't for beginners because you are a seasoned player, you are good at Magic. You got to kind of pick your windows.
So the birthing pod versions of the list play much better into the mid-range world.
Okay.
Because you're doing things like Bloom Tender. You're not going as fast, but you're still going fast.
Right, right. But
so you're still doing your value engines with Elmar. You're still doing the make lots of mana early and then go for wins.
Right.
Worldgorger Dragon has always been kind of this weird little boogeyman in CEDH, especially in its early days because Thassa's wasn't a thing back then. So doing Worldgorger things was one of the best things to do at one point.
Yeah.
But things like Thassa's, Underworld Breach, Thrasios, Kinnan, all of those decks kind of pushed Worldgorger out.
Yeah.
So, like, Worldgorger's kind of an old boomer tech for CEDH.
But what you're saying is you're giving up the, hey, I can get blown out but you're probably winning more and faster than you are getting blown out. You're like,
Correct.
I'll play Worldgorger and win consistently turn 2, turn 3 instead of playing the slower game turn 4, turn 5 because it's mid-range hell. And you're willing to take that gamble, and obviously it's paying
Correct. Part of the deck is that it is a gamble. You can do everything you need to prevent someone from being able to interact. And a Boseiju comes out of nowhere, and you lose your board. And sadly, none of the protection spells we have in Sans Blue get around a Boseiju.
Deflecting Swat, right?
But in my list in particular, to get around all the counter spells, I believe I'm on 8 or 9 silence style cards.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. Let's see.
So.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was. Two things I was going to point out is all the silence effects, and why not the Abdel Adrian line? Is Worldgorger Dragon just better?
So, Abdel Adrian, one of the big things. So if you go to the sorceries, is Unmarked Grave. Unmarked Grave can only get non-legendaries.
Okay.
So with Unmarked Grave, you can do Hoarding Broodlord or Worldgorger. You sadly can't do Abdel. The other thing with Abdel is you have to have artifact mana in play.
Oh.
With Worldgorger Dragon, he exiles your lands too.
Flying Trample enters the battlefield, exile all other permanents you control, leaves the battlefield, return the exile card. Okay, I see. And it's easier to go infinite, right?
Yeah. It's not necessarily that it's easier to go infinite. It's that I only need Command Tower and Wernog in play to win the game.
And you win the game. Okay.
With Abdel, you need Wernog and Mox Opal or Arcane Signet or Felwar Stone to make your infinite mana.
So it's more consistent.
So you have to have that extra piece.
Yeah, since you don't have card draw in the command zone, well, I guess you do with clues, but like a Temna, you're sacrificing that. Like your whole deck is tutors, tutors and combos, and it's just like one demonic tutor and the game's over, or one unmarked grave, or one lively dirge. So let's kind of talk about it since I'm looking at it. So the whole deck is around Worldgorger Dragon, right? That's the main loop, and then infinite mana draw your deck.
So the reason there's a name, the reason the name of the deck is Magda won't play with the dragons, but I will, is because one of the other decks I play is Magda, and one of the funny jokes is Magda doesn't play any dragons in its current iteration.
Right.
So
and you're not a Magda in this list. I thought you would be.
And I'm on Worldgorger and Broodlord, which are both dragons. So it's funny that the deck that most people associate with dragons, my list has no dragons in it. Yeah. And this deck is running dragons.
Right. Yeah.
But the two main lines that I go for in the deck are the Worldgorger Dragon, which is something that I will go for if I feel is open.
Yeah.
If there's no interaction.
Or you have like a silence.
Yeah, like if I have a silence up or there's a defense grid or an Autumn's Veil, those are the kinds of times where I'll feel more comfortable going for Worldgorger.
And it's instant speed.
Huh?
Yeah, it's instant speed, right? Like with Dance of the Dead?
Only if you're doing Necromancy.
Necromancy, yeah.
And if I don't feel like the Worldgorger is safe, sometimes I will just pivot to the Hoarding Broodlord lines.
Okay, yeah, let's kind of get into those. So Worldgorger Dragon goes infinite with the enchantments Animate Dead, Dance of the Dead, and Necromancy. When they ETB and leave, they see each other, right? And then you can flicker infinite mana. I think
Yep.
everybody
So
knows
what
that pretty much.
happens is the way Animate Dead and those three enchantments work with Worldgorger is when Animate Dead enters, it takes Worldgorger from your grave and puts it into play.
Mm-hmm.
The Worldgorger Dragon ETB goes onto the stack, which exiles your Animate Dead.
Mm-hmm.
Animate Dead has a clause that whenever it leaves the battlefield, you sacrifice the creature.
Right. Yep.
So, Worldgorger ETB, you lose all of your permanents, and then you sacrifice your Worldgorger.
Right. So it would.
The
Yeah.
Worldgorger has a leave the battlefield trigger that puts all of your permanents back into play.
Mm-hmm.
So your Animate Dead will enter again.
So then you hold priority, right, and float all the mana.
So you can hold priority here, but when the Animate Dead enters, it'll put the Worldgorger back into play, and then it'll put another ETB on the stack. And from there, you can float your mana.
Gotcha. Yeah. The cool thing about this deck is if you have your commander out, you just need colorless mana. You just need a Grim Monolith.
Correct.
Or like a Soul Ring. Like you don't, a lot of those like Hullbreaker loops or like Cannon loops, it's like, okay, infinite colorless mana, fucking you find a Thrasios. This deck is just like, fuck around and find out. Like,
the only downside if you don't have colored mana is the main win line at instant speed
Orcish.
is to Orcish Bowmaster.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, but then you could just. How do you stop the loop?
So if there is any other creature in grave, in anyone's graveyard, that stops the loop.
What if it isn't?
If there isn't another creature in grave, you can force an intentional draw.
Oh, okay. Well, you have
If
your whole
you
deck
have
in your
no
hand,
way-
right? At this point.
Well, say you don't have anything in play other than your Animate Dead and your Worldgorger, and there are no creatures in grave. You cannot stop the loop, and nobody has interaction. It will create a series of infinite triggers that can never end, so it automatically forces the game to draw.
Okay. Okay.
There are a bunch of other instances of this, like Dan has a thing that happens with it. And there's a bunch of other cards that can force draws if they put infinite triggers on the stack.
Yeah, but that's just got to be because you're drawing your whole deck. You can Kong the Weak, you can Dark Red, you can Entomb something.
Exactly.
You can, okay, let me just Dark Red Orcish. Okay, now Orcish, now do the, like, that's probably never really going to happen, but it could happen. Can you run me through the Hoarding Broodlord line?
So, the Hoarding Broodlord line is long, and there are multiple different variations of it.
Okay. I was just thinking the sacrifice one, or the burnt offering one, right?
Yep, burnt offering is a part of every single one of the lines. The Discord that is attached to my link or my page.
Yeah, I see it.
In that Discord, I actually have the whole line pinned. Okay. So if anyone ever forgets it, you can actually go in and look at the line.
Okay, yeah.
But the basic premise of the line is you put Hoarding Broodlord in play, and you grab Saw in Half.
Yep.
Most people know this line, but most people know that it's going to grab you like a Thassa's and a Demonic. Or it'll grab you two pieces of a combo.
Yeah.
So Saw in Half, you destroy your Hoarding Broodlord, and you make 2 copies of it. You then get to search your library 2 more times.
It's not legendary.
This is where things start to diverge. There are a bunch of different lines you can go for depending on your board state, but in every single one of those lines, you're going to grab Burnt Offering every single time. if you can.
Second
If you
creature,
can't, you'll probably be grabbing Culling the Weak
okay.
to make up for the mana. But what you'll do is the lines include you can grab Final Parting, which is the 5 mana sorcery.
Mm-hmm.
You search your library for 2 cards, put 1 into your hand and 1 into your grave.
Okay.
So what you'll do is you will cast the Burnt Offering, sacrificing the copy of a Broodlord, making yourself 8 black mana. You will then cast Final Parting using 5 of that mana, or 4, because Hoarding Broodlord allows spells you cast from exile to have Convoke.
Mm-hmm.
So you will cast your Final Parting, and you can put Worldgorger Dragon into your graveyard and grab any of the enchantments to reanimate it.
Okay.
And you can present that loop, make your infinite mana, and whenever you want to stop the loop, so this loop in particular, you do not need Wernog in play, you don't need anything else in play. Because you stop the loop after you make infinite mana by grabbing another one of your enchantment reanimate effects. And then you present the loop again by casting your second enchantment reanimate effect on the Worldgorger again.
Okay.
Because when you're doing this loop, the original Broodlord ends up in your graveyard.
Oh, then you tutor your whole deck.
Exactly.
Oh, that's simple.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that line requires you to have 0 cards in play.
Yeah, and we're scooping to that. Guys, I have my whole deck in my hand. I have infinite mana. What do y'all want me to do? How do y'all want to win?
Exactly.
Oh, you have a protection from One Ring? Sweet. I'll kill all of them, and on your upkeep, I have effects.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, because Necromancy is a card that exists, Necromancy is one of the only ways to win around the One Ring protection in this current iteration outside of Praetor's Grasp.
Okay.
Because if you have your entire deck in your hand, and there's at least one blue player at the table, they probably have Thassa's in their deck.
Yeah.
So, you can just go Praetor's Grasp their Thassa's and win with theirs.
Oh, that's easy. And then isn't there Pinnacle Monk lines?
Correct. So that is the line that is specifically pinned in the Discord, because that line is substantially longer than most of the others.
Yeah, that's fine. Good.
So it starts with the same thing as the Final Parting line, but instead of grabbing Final Parting, you grab Pinnacle Monk. So you will cast your Pinnacle Monk after you've cast your Burnt Offering. But this time you make 2 red mana and 6 black mana this time. So you'll use 2 of the red and 2 of the black. So you'll have 4 black floating after this. And you will cast your Pinnacle Monk. When it enters, you will return Saw in half from your graveyard.
I gotcha. Infinite Pinnacle Monk.
You will then Saw in half your Pinnacle Monk.
Yeah. Get one back.
When the copies enter, Saw in half will be in your graveyard. So when they enter, you'll return Burnt Offering and Saw in half to your hand. So when you go to cast that Saw in half the first time, you'll have 1 black floating from that original Burnt Offering.
Oh, and it goes infinite. Okay.
So you'll cast Burnt Offering, sacrificing one of your copies of Pinnacle Monk, which will make you 5 black mana.
Infinite. Okay.
You'll then use 3 of it to saw in half a Pinnacle Monk, grab Burnt, and saw in half. Every single time, this nets you 1 mana of red or black. So at this point, you now have infinite red and black mana.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Once you have infinite red and black mana, you can then saw in half your original Broodlord or one of the copies of the Broodlord that's left to tutor your deck 2 times.
Nice.
What I'll usually do is I will grab Praetor's Grasp and I will grab another reanimation effect. Okay. I will then reanimate the original Pinnacle Monk to get saw in half back. I will then present the same loop that I did before with Burnt Offering and saw in half, but this time with Praetor's Grasp.
Exile everybody's.
So I will then exile all of my opponent's libraries and pass the turn.
Yeah.
Or I can just go grab Wheel of Fortune out of my deck and kill everyone that way.
Yeah,
when you have infinite mana, you usually can find a way to get there.
You know what this deck reminds me of? This deck reminds me of like an evil like Tenma Thrasios deck. Like the bad side of it. They kind of work like that. It's like, okay, I have my infinite mana outlet, and I have my thing that I can untap creatures, and I can, make stuff. So kind of drawing cards. Like Elmer's the Timna and Wernog's a Thrasios, but it's like just faster. Like that's awesome.
So one thing I saw you highlighting over was that Voldaren Epicure up at the top. That one drop red.
I want to talk about. Yep.
So.
Oh, it's an outlet.
Most people who've never played Standard will never know this draft chaff common. 1 red for a 1/1 vampire. When it enters, it deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you make a blood token. So blood tokens have pay 1 and tap it to discard a card and draw a card. So it's kind of a rummage effect. The big thing about Voldaren Epicure is that at 1 mana, if I'm doing my Worldgorger Dragon loop,
you just win.
It's a second Bowmasters. It'll kill everybody.
You just win right there. Yeah.
It makes a blood token, which is an artifact, so it helps turn on Mox Opal.
Oh, okay.
And if you end up drawing Worldgorger Dragon or Hoarding Broodlord, the blood token allows you to pay 1 and discard it from your hand to draw a card.
Oh, so that has 3 effects. Okay. I just thought it was an outlet.
So it's a win con for Worldgorger. It gets rid of your fatties from your hand for your reanimations, and it helps turn on your Mox Opal early in the game.
That's awesome. What about Torch the Tower? What does that do?
So, Torch the Tower, Natural State, which is the 1 green up in the top right, and Nature's Claim all kind of fill a similar role. So, blue Necropotence decks, like Rogsai, will use like a Chain of Vapor to put their Necropotence back in their hand at the end of turn. Or they'll Born Upon a Wind or Valley Flood Color. We don't have those. We don't have bounce effects. We don't have a lot of instant speed stuff. So we have to get a little creative. Nature's Claim, Natural State can deal with most, if not all, of the artifacts and enchantments that see play in CEDH right now. But they can also remove your own Necropotence.
Okay, I gotcha.
Torch the Tower fills a similar role, but it's only good at removing your own Necropotence because it has a nice little keyword there called Bargain.
Sack and enchantment.
So Bargain, as most people know it from Beseech the Mirror, you can sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or a token as an additional cost. So, if, say, I Necropotence for 30 cards, and I have one red floating, if I cast Torch the Tower and I bargain it, sacrificing my Necropotence, even if Torch the Tower gets countered, the Necropotence is still gone.
Gotcha.
Because it's part of the cost.
It's a part of the cost. And what's the main reason why you want to get rid of Necropotence? Is that because it shuts off your Broodlord anime deadlines?
So, Necropotence, shutting it off isn't necessarily a huge deal. You don't necessarily need to remove it in order to try and present wins. It's that most of our lines do require, actually, all of the lines in this deck require Graveyard or top of the deck or top of your deck manipulation.
Gotcha.
Like with Citadel.
Okay.
So that's one of the big reasons I'm not on Necro Dominance, because Necro Dominance just completely shuts off your graveyard, while Necropotence only stops your discarding.
Right. Yeah, I hate that card.
But being able to remove your own Necropotence with an Underworld Breach in your hand is huge.
Is that your backup win line? Just Breach.
So Underworld Breach is kind of a value piece.
Okay.
That also accidentally just kind of works well in the deck. Because Grinding Station and Wernog are one of your win conditions. Because whenever Wernog enters during your Worldgorger loop, if you have Grinding Station in play, you can sacrifice the clues to mill your opponents out. So say you don't have Bowmasters or Voldaren Epicure anymore.
Okay.
You can then present this loop with Grinding Station to mill your opponents out.
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay. Is there any other combo lines before we get into the Rumble that I need to know about?
So
Citadel.
one of the lines that I know a lot of people don't know about is Stitcher Supplier
Okay.
and Culling the Weak.
Oh.
So with Culling the Weak, you sacrifice a creature to make 4 black. Stitcher Supplier, when it enters or leaves, you mill 3 cards.
Okay.
So with Underworld Breach,
mill your old deck. Yeah.
You always go neutral on cards in your graveyard, but you always go up 2 black mana.
Yeah.
So if you have 4 or 5 cards in your graveyard to begin with, when you go to start doing Stitcher Supplier and Culling the Weak,
right,
you can pick and choose what cards you want to leave in there at any given time.
And in this deck, you can just wait until you get an Anime Dead. Right?
Correct. You can leave your Worldgorger in grave, and you can keep going until you hit your Stitcher Supplier.
Okay, so this is a real deck. Like, this isn't just a haha, I don't like blue. No, this deck has legs. It plays all the silence effects. It has mana. It has card draw. It's got... this is like Crick on steroids. And Tenma Thrasios, like, if you don't like blue. Like, this deck is fucking spicy. 25 lands. Okay. So it's a turbo deck at heart.
And Mount Doom, is if you have a way to make red and black when you're presenting your Worldgorger Dragon loop, this is another way to win the game. Because Mount Doom, you can pay 1 a red and a black and tap it to deal 1 damage to each opponent.
Gotcha.
So every time you make your infinite mana during the Worldgorger loop, you can tap your Mount Doom to deal 1 damage, and then it'll come back untapped to deal 1 damage.
Okay. So infinite mana, and then just Mount... It's kind of like those other ETBs. I'm a whole priority, float mana, correct. Tap Mount Doom. Okay, I'm going to let the Broodlord resolve, bounce, come back, 3 mana. Yeah, it's a land. It's not a creature. Okay.
Yep. At one point, I was running Emergent Zone and Crop Rotation in the list. So I could just make my infinite mana, use crop rotation to put Mount Doom or Emergent Zone into play.
Mm-hmm.
With Emergent Zone, I can then just cast anything at instant speed, or just get Mount Doom and kill them that way.
Yeah, no, I like that. I don't think this deck is low on win cons by any means. Oh, that's so good. I'm trying to think. There's something. So you're not in Emergent Zone, instant speed lines. Ad nauseum. I've seen a lot of ad nauseum. This deck doesn't need it because all the big stuff.
So the big reason that I didn't do Ad nauseum is
5,
one of the things with Ad nauseum
6.
is it's good for instant speed. But most of the mana in this deck is permanent based mana. And when you don't have blue to protect your Ad nauseum, or you don't have blue for your flash speeds or those easy ritual based win conditions, I found that Bolas Citadel is better in your green variations of decks.
Okay.
Because all of your stuff is permanent based. Yes, there's a lot of spells, but most of what you're doing is permanent based. So with Citadel, you can kind of just churn through your deck, especially because I'm only on 24 lands and an MDFC. You very rarely run into 2 lands on top at any given time.
Right.
And even if you do, you usually have clues that you can crack to draw.
You just don't have any goblins to cheat it in, so you're just casting it. How's mana in this deck? It's pretty good, right? You have a lot of removal.
Mana?
You have a lot of interaction. Yeah, can you just
yes.
cast six black? It's not a big deal, or 6 mana.
Yep. I have actually used Burnt Offering to sacrifice my Elmar before to cast a Citadel.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that works.
Because Burnt Offering in hand is, if Elmar's in play, it's just a dark ritual.
You have a lot of instant speed mana. Cabal Ritual, Rain of Filth, Dark Ritual, Culling the Weak, Burnt Offering. Okay. So mana's not shy in this deck. Deathheart Shaman Birds, Huron Noble Hierarch, both Spirit Guides, you're even on Lotho. Okay. Alright. So before we get into the Rumble, we're running out of time. Before we get into the Rumble, is there anything else you wanted to say to like a beginner sleeving this deck up, or any combo or anything that they wouldn't know?
The big thing that I recommend with this deck is learning to read your opponent's hands.
Yeah.
When an opponent, during one turn, leaves open mana, and then someone puts something on the stack, and you see them kind of hesitate about whether or not it should be dealt with,
Yeah.
you usually assume that they have something in hand. And you just want to keep that in the back of your mind before you start trying to go for wins.
Gotcha. Yeah, don't, like, if you have a turn 2, dragon, like what I do too, when I play Sans Blue, I kind of like talk about it. Like, oh man, that'd be crazy if somebody went for it, and they were like, oh, well, they're not winning, and it's like, okay, thank you for free information.
Exactly. So, like, when you're not in blue, you kind of have to feel out the interaction at the table.
Yeah.
You just kind of have to keep poking and prodding every so often, just kind of ask questions and just get the feel about what people are doing.
I got you. Yeah, so I definitely like the deck. The deck is Reanimator. It has a game plan. If you can't do early Worldgorger Dragon, you can sit back, you can draw cards, you have Horde and Broodlord. It's literally one tutor away from winning. Like, if I resolve this final party, you guys are cooked. I remember I was on Roxai, I was practicing for the Boil, and in step I did something. Oh, I had a Valley Foot Color, I cast a Meme Betrayal. So Hunter goes, in response to your Meme Betrayal, because he already had Worldgorger in the graveyard, and I knew he was going to go for it. He responds, and then he goes to do the loop. On top of my Meme Betrayal, that's a win. And then somebody stopped him. And I was like, whoosh! And I didn't know that deck could win instant speed like that. And it was just like, holy shit. I think Yeah, he had like swords. He had like one mana up, and it was like the only card you're like out of his whole deck. I know he has three cards that could stop me, and that was one of the three cards, and he had it, and you're like, damn. And then the game before that, he won like turn two, turn three, and we're just like, all I had Rock Side, and I think there's a blue farm and something else, and we're just like, oh shit. So the deck is definitely powerful. The deck can explode out of nowhere, and then a lot of people too will undermine it, but oh, that's not blue farm, that's not TNT, he's just sans blue, he's not going to do anything, and then you're like, you guys got anything? Because I win here. And it's like, nope.
The entire Royal Rumble, every time I showed up, Wernog was always the top commander. Mm-hmm. And they would go, oh, you're playing Blues Clues, which is Wernog Bjorna, which is the sans green version.
Yeah.
And I would immediately go, no. Here, read this, Commander.
Yeah, I'm playing this dog shit sans blue commander. Don't worry about it.
But the cat's out the bag now. I can't just run away with games because people don't know what I'm doing anymore.
That's exactly what happened. The first game he won turn 2, turn 3, and then second game we're like, all right, we're not losing to this shit again. Exactly. Correct. So we got about 10 minutes. Let's kind of go through it. How'd you feel the tournament? How did the deck feel? Was it early, late? Kind of go round by round. Like, that was a huge tournament. And you got 8th, I think?
So, the tournament was run really well. Okay. I really enjoyed the tournament. They did a great job running it. I've been to their event, King's Court event, before, and they do a really good job running it. It's always great. They're great guys over there. The Massachusetts scene is great. I would love to get over there more often, but sadly I live in New York, so it's a little bit of a drive for me.
Okay.
But going into King's Court, I was very adamant that I needed to get at least 2 wins and 2 draws on day one. Because I think everybody was kind of going in thinking that 4 wins was the cutoff. So getting at least 2 wins on day one gave you a really good shot for day 2, at least. So round 1, I was in seat 2. We had a Rog Thrash player, me, a Malcolm Vile, and a Gitrog player. Sadly, a few people had to mulligan low, and there were only 2 blue players in the pod. So that made me feel better going into that game, as I'm the turbo deck at the table. I'm probably going to try and be presenting games early wins. So turn 1, Rog Thrash player just kind of develops value because they mold low. I just play turn 1 birds. And then Malcolm Vile player, they just play Lotus Petal and a land and pass. Gitrog player goes Deathrite and pass. The Rog Thrash player puts a few things on the stack. They put a Neo form onto the stack, which makes the Malcolm Vile player just kind of perk their ears up as they're thinking about, should we counter this? Table comes to agreement. No, it's not that big of a deal. They go grab Trinket Mage, and a few things happen there. Go to my turn. I go Elmar, and one thing with Elmar is it feels counterproductive, but you want to leave your 0-drop mana rocks in hand if you're leaning towards Elmar.
So you can untap.
Because you can play Elmar, and then you cast your 0-drop to untap your dork. And then from there, you can have your mana rock and your dork untapped, so you can crack that clue in that rotation or use it for interaction. So I do that. I play Elmar. I slap someone for 3 with Elmar because he has haste for some reason. And I hold up a clue activation, and I pass the turn. Malcolm Vile, they play Malcolm and pass. Gitrog player taps their Deathrite to cast a Sylvan Library and a Finhorn Elves. As seen as it's only turn 2 and they're in 4th seat, they need to develop their advantage. Mm-hmm. The Thrash Vile player uses the last card in their hand to transmute artifact into a One Ring. The Malcolm Vile player didn't counter anything, so I felt pretty comfortable with that. Knowing that the Rog Thrash player had 0 cards in hand going into this, and the Malcolm Vile player didn't counter anything. So my draw for turn was a Animate Dead, and I already had Lively Dirge in hand. So on my turn 3, I cast Lively Dirge, put Hoarding Broodlord in the grave, Animate Dead, put it into play, and then I went through the Broodlord line with Pinnacle Monk into Praetor's Grasp, exiled everybody's library, and then cast a wheel. So game 1, felt really comfortable. Win round 1, turn 3. The Malcolm Vile player did have a 2-mana counterspell in their hand. So if they hadn't tapped out for Malcolm, I wouldn't have been able to go for it.
Right.
And the Deathrite had been tapped, so I felt comfortable going for it, knowing that they didn't have that interaction up. Mm-hmm. Round 2 was a very, very different game this time. We had Kalia of the Vast in seat 1. Mm-hmm. Hidetsugu and Zarin, I think it is. This person actually ended up top 4ing.
Yeah.
During the event.
The blue-black.
And then Anala, and then me. So I was in 4th seat this game. Game went real quick. Kalia the Vast mulled really low. Anala mulled really low. And me and the Hidetsugu player kept a pretty good hand. Kalia player kind of just went for a Ranger Captain of Eos and Esper Sentinel early game. Hidetsugu player just kind of played Hidetsugu and was playing around in the early game. Meanwhile, Anala went turn 2 Spellseeker. To which the Kalia player immediately Pyroblasted it. And turn went to me. At this point, I had Necromancy in hand and a Entomb in my hand. So I ended up just holding that up and passing the turn. Because there was a Ranger Captain of Eos in play, so if I went for one, I was just going to get stopped. And I didn't want to do that because I didn't have any of my outlets in play. So there was no reason for me to push yet. Mm-hmm. Kalia player just kind of plays land and passes. The Hidetsugu player then goes and copies their Hidetsugu. There's a big discussion about, do we counter this or do we let this resolve? And we end up deciding to let it resolve. And the Hidetsugu player then proceeds to cast a Rise of the Eldrazi.
Oh, shit.
For those of you who don't know, that is a 12-mana spell that says, take an extra turn, destroy target permanent, and draw 4 cards. At this point, the Anala player then proceeds to cast an Ad Nauseam in response, which then the Hidetsugu player also counters. Rise of the Eldrazi happens, destroying the Ranger Captain, which makes me feel better. And then the Hidetsugu player goes to take their next turn. they put a clever impersonator on the stack to copy their Hidetsugu again. From here, I did not have the mana to cast the Entomb at this time. So instead, I tried to play it safe, and I was going to Necromancy the Ranger Captain of EOs so that the Hidetsugu player could not cast another spell.
Right.
In response, they saw in half their Hidetsugu. And then proceed to cast a Enter the Infinite with my Necromancy still on the stack.
Oh, no.
And that game ended very quickly. We all picked up after Enter the Infinite was on the stack.
Yep, good game. Draw my deck.
So, round 1, game turn 3. Round 2, game turn 4. Round 3, though. I was on the play this game. We had a Nimrus in seat 2, a TNT in seat 3, and a Timna Rog in seat 4. I went turn 1, Dark Rit, Necropotence. Both blue players passed immediately on it.
Good game.
I went, okay, paid 28 life.
Yeah.
Ended up with a hand that had Animate Dead, Entomb, Underworld Breach, Mount Doom, Mana Vault, Lotus Petal, and I forget what the last card was. The Nimrus player just plays a land and passes. Same with the TNT player. They go Shifting Woodlands, so tapped green source, turn 1. And then the Rog Timna player basically dumps their hand because they kept a good hand going forth. And then on my turn, I just played land, Entomb, Animate Dead.
GG's.
Because my land for turn 1 was Badlands, and my land for turn 2 was Mount Doom. So I had my outlet in play, so I just entombed my Worldgorger, put an Animate Dead on the stack, and killed everybody with Mount Doom on turn 2.
God damn, that's so good. Fuck.
Our round we spent more time mulliganing than we did playing Magic.
The game.
So that was a good round 3. So I'm already 2-1 in round 3. We go to round 4. Round 4, I was in 4th seat again. We had a... Who was it? Timna... I believe it was another Timna Thrasios.
Crap, I'm running out of time. Yeah.
In first seat. A Gitrog in second. Rogsai in third.
Gitrog?
And me in fourth. Or no, it was Najila in third. Premise of the game ended up Gitrog went for it, and one of the players at my table wanted him to play through the entire line because Gitrog is technically non-deterministic.
Right.
And game state changes quite a lot. So we had a judge come over, and the judge basically ruled that he would have to do it manually. Which just kind of shut the Gitrog player down. And the rest of the game was spent as a 3v1 against the Gitrog until he just agreed to a draw.
Okay. That's fine. That makes sense.
It felt pretty horrible, but the one person at our table was very adamant that he had to do it manually. So we ended up with a draw that round.
100%.
Round 5, I was in 4th seat again. We had Sisse in first, Wernog Bjorna, so Blues Clues in seat 2, a Magda in 3, and then me in 4. Game went fairly smoothly. Sisse was looking to put a really good win on the stack. I had just cast the One Ring. It was like turn 3. And I had an empty hand, and the Blues Clues player was scared of what the Sisse had, so they go Bowmaster and Wheel.
Uh-oh.
Because I had the One Ring protection, they just blew up all my creatures, blew up everybody's board, and hit the Sisse player for a bunch of damage. Magda player rebuilds, and then we get to my turn, where I go down a Worldgorger Dragon loop after I animate dead the Wernog Bjorna player's Grand Abolisher.
Oh, okay.
To make sure that my line resolved properly. But if you do that, the first time you exile everything and everything enters, the Grand Abolisher goes back to them.
Oh, okay.
But the reason I did that was to make sure that my Veil of Summer that I had cast resolved. So yep. I used their Abolisher to make sure my silence effect resolved. I end up drawing through my entire deck, and then I just do Bowmaster loop to kill everybody.
Okay.
So end of day 1, I am at 16 points. I am 3-1-1.
Yeah, you're in.
No. 17 was bubble range.
Oh, shit. Yeah, but you go into day 2 feeling confident.
Oh, I am feeling great.
Oh, you're here. Yeah.
I'm feeling really good. 1 draw puts me in good bubble range, and 2 draws guarantees. If I get a win, I'm guaranteed, and I'm in like second or first seat.
Yeah.
So round 6 on day 2, Poor Soul was paired up into 3 people in the top 8, and he needed a draw and a win to get in. So he didn't want to take a game with 3 people in the top 8. So he decides, and everybody agrees, we'll just take this intentional draw. Sounds and good. He was just like, I'll hope for better pairings next time.
Yeah.
So I'm at 17 at this point. But I really want that win or that draw to guarantee my spot so I don't get bubbled.
Yeah, right.
We go to the next round, and I'm in 4th seat again. All of my opponents need the win in order to get in. So no intentional draws there. This game we had a Tivit, a Tyam, and a Rogsai, and then me. Tyam made a fatal mistake earlier in the game by grabbing Phyrexian Tower instead of Gaia's Cradle off of a crop rotation. And what I can say is that cost them that game. Rogsai was put on the back foot. They had to mold a 5, and it wasn't a very good 5. I started the game with turn 1 birds into turn 2 survival, which put everybody immediately in defense mode. To the point where the Rogsai player had to use their Wishclaw talisman to grab interaction to stop me. They gave the Wishclaw over to the Tivit player so that they could also grab interaction to stop me. So at this point, I look at the table and I go, I'm not going to try and present wins. There's so much interaction, I'm just going to go down values. So I end up going to grab Ranger Captain, put a Ranger Captain into play, and just start grinding out the long game. Using Elmar, Wernog, and Esper Sentinel to kind of push me through the mid to late game. instead of trying to present wins. Tyam ended up whiffing on 6 or 7 triggers on a sack outlet or cradle, and we ended up going to time that game. So I ended up 3-1-3 in Swiss.
18. Yeah.
And my only loss was to one of the people in the top 16. So I was feeling really, really good. So semifinals, we had Wounded Satellite. Freedom Waffle, not Wounded Satellite. Freedom Waffle. Wrong person. In first seat. Will in second seat, me in third, and Max P in fourth.
What decks are they playing?
So Freedom Waffle was on Kinnan.
Yeah.
We then had Will on TNT. Tim Necrom, Blue Farm. Me on Wernog Elmar, and then we had Max P on TNT.
Yeah.
Everybody this game mulled low. Freedom Waffle mulled down to 5. Will mulled down to 6. I went down to 4.
Oh, shit.
And Max P kept a 6. Game started off with all 3 of the green players playing Mana Dorks on turn 1, and Blue Farm player on turn 2 slamming down a Curse Totem into 3 green players who have just only played Mana Dorks. So nobody was feeling happy at that point. And this was, for reference, this was a 3-hour, 45-minute game.
4 hours
for semifinals. Almost 4 hours.
Holy shit.
That is almost the length of all of my other games together.
Right.
So my semifinal game was almost the length of all 7 of my rounds.
That's crazy.
Exactly. The game turned into a slogfest where Timna and Crom beats were the game. Everybody was just beating everybody. Freedom Waffle had 2 Ristic studies, Emergent Zone active the entire game. Nobody was paying for Ristic studies. It was just people dying to Croms and Timnas. People were copying Croms. It was just copy effects everywhere.
Yeah.
I, on the Multi 4, ended up just doing draw pass most of the entire game. I didn't hit my second land drop until about turn 5 or 6. But I had a Necromancy in hand, and my turn 1 draw was Worldgorger Dragon. So, what ends up happening is we draw, go, to the point where I end up just discarding 2 hand size Worldgorger Dragon.
Nice.
I then proceed to hold up instant speed Worldgorger Dragon loops for the rest of the game, but none of the blue players are throwing out interaction until it's too late. Will ends up casting a Demonic Consultation and exiles all of his win conditions for a Grand Abolisher. He casts his Grand Abolisher and ends up feeding Freedom Waffles, Ristic Studies, and Mystic Remora. So every time Will cast any non-creature spell, Freedom Waffle drew 3 cards. So he was Ancestral Recalling off of every spell. And they ended up besiegeing the Underworld Breach that he was going with, and he ended up having to pass the turn. Goes to me, I draw a pass. Max P then ends up putting a silence on the stack after Freedom Waffle has a Wandering Archaic in play, a High Fate Trickster, a Seedborn Muse, a Mirage Mirror. He just has everything going, has like 40 cards in his hand.
Oh, it's over. Yeah.
And the game just was over.
Yeah.
At the very end of the stack, when Max P stopped fighting with Freedom Waffle, I tried to just slam my Necromancy, see if I could do it at the end of the stack, and it just ate a counterspell, and that was that.
Aw. You're something big
So,
right there.
The entire game, I was just holding up that instant speed Necromancy, so as soon as one person went for it, I was just going to be able to try and sneak that win in over top of someone else. But sadly, nobody was blowing their interaction anywhere because everybody was good players. Nobody was just throwing away their counterspells.
Right.
So, sadly, wasn't able to get through into that top four. But it was still a great game nonetheless. Great politics, great talking through everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody paying their taxes, making sure nobody was feeding until that final turn.
Well, your only losses are from the guy in top four and then the guy who won the whole thing. So
Correct.
You can leave that tournament with your head high, and now everyone's building this deck because of you. And I think that's something you can hang your hat on, and it's impressive. And hats off. Like, this deck is insane. Like, you were that close from winning. Like, holy shit.
The main reason, like one of the biggest reasons I ended up bringing this deck, and the reason I wanted to bring it was because I felt that it deserved to be explored by more people. For reference, I've been on this deck for about a year now, and there was only about 7 of us working on the deck.
Yeah, now it's on the map.
And now it's on the map, and people better than me at deck building can now work with it.
Yeah, good for you.
So, getting it on the map was my first goal, and now that it's on the map, my phone has just been blowing up from messages and everything. Like, hey, what is this for, and what is this for? Why is this in the deck?
Yeah.
In fact, right before this, I had just received a message like, hey, why is Natural State, Nature's Claim, and Torch the Tower in the deck?
Yeah.
So I was writing up a message for them so that they could have a understanding of why it's in the deck.
Yeah, good for you. We're running out of time, but I'm going to put the links in below, the Discord in below, the Moxfield. I'm going to put his Discord name. He's a great guy. I've played with him before. This deck's insane. And if you have any questions for me, I have a Discord. I'll send you over to him. I'm going to put the list. Like, let's leave this deck up more. Let's play more Sans Blue. Like, I agree with you. Everyone's just, I'm going to have a Ristic Study. No, this deck is like, if you don't deal with me, I'm going to win with the fucking Brood Lord and a Worldgorger Dragon in 2025, which, that's insane. That's all the time we have. Thanks, Hunter, for your time, brother. You're fucking awesome. Everyone hit the subscribe button. Like, we're out. See ya.
See ya.